Welcome everyone, today we're going to take a look at version control. I want to create a repository and get the code out on GitHub so you guys and girls can also get the code. We're also going to create a GitHub action, okay, so we're going to get an introduction to what a build agent is, how to run commands on it and stuff like that. Basically, a slight introduction, nothing too complicated, just how it works. We'll also touch a little bit on the tools that are available to you. So for example, for me, stuff like Writer, and maybe your IDE has some cool features as well. But in that space, again, we will have a just a gentle touch, okay? But nevertheless, let's get started. I have my terminal open here. It's in the directory of the project. I type in git, okay, and that means git is installed on my computer, and I can create a repository, initialize one, add, commit, whatever, do general git stuff. This is not a tutorial about Git, so I'm not going to be developing too much on that. If you are creating a project, you will usually already have Git initialized or even Git ignore. So let's go ahead and see what we have, right? So I'm going to do ls to list stuff that is currently in the directory, and I don't have Git ignore file, right? So there will be some files that I want to ignore. The next project came with a Git repository initiated as well. So I have gone ahead and removed it before I actually thought about making this episode. So you don't get to see me remove it, but I'm just telling you that it's removed. And it comes with a git ignore, right? So it already ignores all the stuff that it needs inside this project, okay? So, and the thing with the git ignore files, they work on different levels. So if you have a top level git ignore, you can have a bottom level git ignore, and that will just ignore separate directories, okay? But never mind, let's go ahead and just get into it, right? So on the terminal here, let's just go ahead and say git init, and this is going to initialize a repository. So now if I do ls, I'm not going to be able to see it because it's a hidden folder. So I can do something along the lines of ls-a, and that's going to list all the hidden folders as well. You will see the .idea, which the folder which is basically related to my browser, and .git, which is now the initialized repository, and all the change tracking is stored in there, okay? So next thing that I like to do is type in git status, and I will just increase my terminal so I have a little bit more space. I have the folders that are essentially not committed, right? So I can commit the .idea file and the rest of the stuff, okay? So you can essentially type out the file that you want to commit. So again, if we say we want to commit just the program.cs file, stuff like git add star, so star is like a wildcard for anything. And let me close this error. We'll say program and star on the end, right? Or program.cs if you want to be that specific. We can say git status. And now we can see the stuff that is still not added and the stuff that has been added to the head, right? So the head is kind of like stuff that is about to go into a version, okay? So you have local changes, then you have the head, and then you have the stuff that is committed, and then you have the stuff that is pushed on remote stuff again. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into Git. I shouldn't be. This is something that you should be familiar with. If you are interested about Git and you're a little bit lost here, just follow for now. Leave a comment that you want me to explain this stuff, and then I will go in depth, okay? So let's just do, if we do git status, we can essentially see what's been added and what's not added. So an easy way for me to do it is git add dot. So that would basically match everything, and all of this stuff would get added. First thing that I want to do is I want to touch .git ignore, and this is going to create a git ignore file for me, right? So ls or ls-a because it's a file with a preceding dot, so git ignore here. If I go to my folder view here, what I want to do is I want to go to this git ignore, and I want to add the .idea folder, the bin folder, and the obj folder, okay? So these are these two folders, bin and obj. This is where the build artifacts are going to be created. I don't want those. And the .idea folder, which is my ID specific settings. I don't want those either. Generally, you can find good git ignore files already pre-built on the internet by just Googling. So you'll Google for something like git ignore in Writer or git ignore for VS Code, because then it's going to ignore the .vs settings and stuff like that. So it depends on what IDE you're working with. So you might want to put different stuff in your git ignore file, right? And maybe your IDE has, or text editor has, the power to already generate one for you. So we've added the stuff. You can see now if I retype git status, the .idea folder and the .bin and obj folders are missing, okay? The rest of the stuff I'm okay with having, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say git add dot, that's if I wanted to add everything, but let's say that I am inside the web client. So now if I do git status, it's gonna go outside. So if I do something like git add dot, it's only gonna add all the stuff that is inside the folder that I'm in. So git status, it's only added the stuff that's inside the folder. If I want to add everything in the repository, I would do git add /a. Right, so usually what you will see me do is do something, or usually what I will do is just say git add a, because I just want to add everything. It doesn't matter what folder I'm in, etc. I'm not always at the root folder. I just do git add a. So that's the initial commit, right? So then git status, again, as a kind of reflex, I keep just doing command git status, command git status. So I always do git status, okay, to see what it's, if I am on the correct branch and what's actually going in and what I'm removing, right? So then let's go ahead and commit. And for the first commit, we can just say init. So it's an initialization, okay? So now if we do git status, we're on branch master, we can do git log. We can see the history and we only have one commit and this is its identifier, and we're on branch master. So, I mean, code's committed, right? We have created our first event of the version change, right? So let's go ahead and push this to master, right? I'm gonna go ahead and open up my browser, go into github.com. Create an account if you need one. Click on this plus here in your repository. If you don't want to do all this stuff, you can come and fork it. So I'm just gonna name this raw coding tricking library. So all the stuff for my YouTube channel I prefix with raw coding. You can name it whatever you want, obviously. But yeah, let's go ahead and just create a repository, make it public, no description. There's no need for that. You can do if you're not familiar with SSH and stuff like that, just skip the SSH bit, just go to the HTTPS bit. If these are the commands here you see that are basically telling you what to do if you don't have a repository enabled. Here is what I want to do if I already have one and I just want to add the remote repository, right? So the key word here is remote, right? It's something that's going to be outside. For our local repository, we have the .git folder. Remote is a record of all the remote repositories where this repository is contained. So we just want to grab this address, paste this in. So now if we type in git remote, we can see the origin there. Before, if we would have typed in git remote, we would have nothing. And then, I mean, you can just do git push. It's going to tell you the command. Go ahead and highlight it. And when you highlight stuff on the terminal, you can paste it straight away. If in this IDE, I can't right click. So sometimes I mess it up, but as soon as you highlight something in the terminal, you can paste it straight away, okay? So I'm not pressing copy or anything like that. I can highlight and then paste straight away. All right, so highlight and paste. This is just if you're not aware of this, right? So we're gonna go ahead, push the branch off to the repository that we currently created. Okay, so if we go back to GitHub, chill, easy peasy, right? So this is just if you haven't done this before. Hopefully you get a little bit more insight. Again, if you want to know more about Git, I can basically give you a general workflow that I use and just kind of explain what stuff is. Okay, so yeah, GitHub Actions. So continuous integration and continuous delivery. For now, we are just gonna build our project, right? So just to give you an idea of what is happening, if you open up your command line and what you do is you type in .NET, okay? You have a command line tool. So all that .NET is somewhere on your computer or even environment variables, okay? So I have a bunch of environment variables. You're going to have this path. Let's go ahead and edit it. And here it is. It's pointing to this path. So in this path, we're going to have a .NET.exe, right? So same as you build your application, you end up with an exe file. It's just an application that's sitting on your computer, and there is a path in your system variables that is pointing to that application. And that is how it knows to basically run this command line. This is what the command line is, if you didn't know, okay? Same with npm, there is a slight variance, but yeah, npm get everything that you put in the command line. You have to add an environment variable in there so it knows where it sits, so you know what to execute it, right? So it's an application on your computer. What we're going to do now is we are going to try to build our application. So we're going to be doing .NET Build, okay? And this just builds, right? So you can see the output logs. We can do .NET and we can do .NET Build, and we can see that we have the command line tool, and we can execute the build. So we have an application that we can build. If we step outside and we try .NET Build, right, there is nothing here to build. So let me try library. Let's go back in, right? So we currently have a command line tool on our computer, and we have an application that we build on our computer. How about we spin up a temporary, or like we purchase a temporary remote computer? All right, so we're gonna have a computer almost like ours, or maybe a different environment. We're gonna have that computer, we're gonna put our source code on it, and we're gonna have the tools on there to essentially build the application on there. And as you know, in the bin and obj folder, we have the artifacts. We can then use that computer to publish it, right? And the sole purpose of the sole existence of that computer out there is to build our application, publish the packages, or maybe deploy it to cloud and stuff like that, right? So that's continuous integration. All it is in the bigger picture is that GitHub, Microsoft, whatever, they have these big server racks, right? So if you don't know what it looks like, right? You have these things, right? In a big data center, so you have thousands of these. So this would be like a local one in a small company, right? And it is like half empty essentially. In Google, all of them are filled. You have billions of these things, right? And all it is hardware. And these server racks will have like 100 cores, whatever, maybe more, and they're optimized to do certain things. But the important bit here to understand is it might be one computer, but what you're gonna get all allocated on that computer, the software on that computer, is gonna allocate you 2 cores, some space on the RAM, and it's basically gonna say, right, you can have this amount of resources, and then we are gonna use those resources to create a virtual machine. A virtual machine is essentially just the same as your operating system. It can spin up Mac, Windows, or a Linux, and different distributions of Linux to essentially just replicate that environment and give you a consistent environment. So what we're going to do is we're going to spin up a virtual machine on one of these things in GitHubs, or because Microsoft owns GitHub, right? But we're going to spin up a virtual machine on one of these things. It's going to build our project, and later on it's going to be deploying it and stuff like that. But for now, it's just going to build it, right? So, and this is called a user agent. The virtual machine that is going to spin up is called a user agent, or not even build agent. Sorry, user agent is the browser and stuff like that. Our application gets built on one of these things. Okay, so that's just for you to keep in mind, and that's what GitHub Actions are. Okay, so currently we don't have a workflow, so let's go ahead and set up a workflow. A workflow is what's going to allow GitHub to essentially look at what is happening on our branch, and then go ahead and tell to the software on one of the server racks to say, yo, quickly create us a virtual machine so we can do something with whatever I specify for it to do, okay? So generally, the way that you want to learn this kind of technology, you go to Google or your search engine and you go GitHub Actions. And the thing that you want to land on is, you can see I tried a bunch of things, but essentially you go on the front page, the first thing that you see, explore GitHub Actions, and then you're like, what the heck is this, right? So this is literally just a collection of like pre-built packages of what that build agent can do, right? So essentially like scripts and tools kind of like the .NET Core CLI tool, but these are specific things that need to occur with parameters. These are actions. So if I would have invoked a .NET command like .NET Build, or let's say git pull, which we're going to utilize one of the commands in this, so it actually works. But primary thing what you want to find is the documentation. So you actually have to scroll to the bottom and go to read the docs and actually find the real docs. Okay, so yeah, I'm not a fan of the current documentation layout, but let's go ahead and see. So again, documentation is hard to navigate, but essentially what we want to do is find out how the YAML file works. So usually these work on a YAML file, but let's go ahead, right? So the general process, you go through one page, second page, you want to find a general thing that you want to set up, right? So I've done this before. So what we're gonna do is go to configure and manage workflow rules, configuring a workflow, and here it's gonna give you a bunch of steps, and eventually you will stumble upon this, right? It's gonna take you some time. It's gonna be new. You actually have to learn how to use the documentation before you can learn the technology, right? All documentations are different. You actually have to spend the time to learn the documentation. So you stumble upon this and you read that all the workflows have to be in this folder. So let's go ahead and add this, okay? So GitHub Workflows. So let's go ahead back to the program. Solutions. And we're gonna add, and actually, no, I don't want that file systems back. Let's get back here. Let's get a directory. GitHub, okay. So GitHub, yep. And then workflows. So the reason I am actually copying this from the documentation is that what I want to show is that I don't just know this stuff, okay? This stuff is not something that is just in my head. I actually go and I have to go find the documentation. I have to look through it. I have to see what's where. I have to remember where it is in the documentation. And then after it, I actually try the thing. I see what fails, what works. I Google around for questions and stuff like that, right? So it's I try to make this as more of a human approach as possible, right? I don't just know this stuff, and that's the main thing that I'm trying to show here. So yeah, step 2, in GitHub Workflows, add a YAML file. Okay, so YAML file. So this is the part that's going to contain a script that looks like this, where we're going to be doing stuff, okay? And I'm going to go over the commands a little bit to give you a bit more context, because if you used a continuous integration tool from the other, you're going to already sort of know what to expect. So GitHub, let's go ahead and insert a file, and I'm going to say build.yaml, okay? So simple build YAML file, GitHub, again, I'm going to just go ahead, edit, tools, attached to solution. So I'm back at this view, okay? So in my workflows, I have build.yaml, and then we want to use, we haven't committed it yet, so we just have to wait just a second, okay? Let's actually build up the file. So the first two are really simple. Let's say a name, greet everyone. This is just the name of your run, and this is just going to be a super apparent. So build my application. So we're going to build the application here and on. So this is an event, and usually if you like scroll up or down, and let's find something. I remember there was a, yeah. So workflow syntax for GitHub Actions. So if you click on this, I'll open it in a new tab. This pretty much explains what all of these events are, what these commands are, right? So what's the syntax is, and again, we will pretty much, once we get around to building a complex pipeline, you will understand more of this, but for now, you should just get an idea. So on push, when we push changes to the remote branch, that's when it's going to get triggered, all right? And there is a bunch of different events, like pushing a feature branch, pushing a hotfix branch, and whatnot, okay? So if you don't know what those are, don't worry. We don't have to specify an array of events that this could trigger off. For now, we are satisfied with just having one push event, okay? Next thing, jobs. So there can be multiple job steps kind of thing. You can run those in parallel, whatnot, all right? Doesn't matter too much again. Let's go ahead and just copy this thing and dissect it in our code. So we have jobs. What do we want to do? Let's build a job. Let's give it a name, greeting. What are we trying to do again? We want to build our app. Okay, that's all we're trying to do. Yeah, we don't need the comment. We kind of know that it's the name of the job that we're doing. Run on Ubuntu latest. Okay, this is that virtual machine that gets created on the rack, and it's not a computer. You don't get a fresh computer, you get a space on a computer. Okay, and somewhere in the documentations it says how big your machines are and stuff like that. And you can do weird stuff like essentially provide your own server rack and tell GitHub, yo, spin up your virtual machines on my server rack. Okay, so the next thing is the steps for the job, right? So you have kind of like a batch, and then you have steps processes. So like you have a function, and then you have statements in that function kind of thing. Be careful with the syntax. It does have to have indents and stuff like that, but what you essentially have is step 1. Every time you have a dash, you have a step. Okay, so this one is hello world. This one looks a little bit weird, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna comment it out, and we are gonna not bother with it now. What is more interesting is this step, because this is quite simple. This is digestible. We can actually just do an echo in here, right? So if we do echo hello world, and this is essentially just a print to the console. So you should get an idea. You can build on your computer. You're gonna get a computer in a server rack. You just want to build your application. So let's go ahead and do some stuff that you can do here. Okay, so if I, for example, type in pwd, I get the current directory. If I do ls, I see stuff in the current directory. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's try to find out where are we on that machine, and the folder that we're going to be ending up in, what is contained in that folder. And bear in mind, because we're getting Ubuntu and it's going to have a bash, if you're going to be grabbing a Windows box or you're going to be grabbing a Mac box, you might have different commands, right? So this is something you need to keep in mind. Instead of the name, we will just say print current directory. Instead of echo, we will say pwd, right? So that's the command. And for the second one, and I'm going to highlight this shift tab to bring it back one more time, and that was a disaster. There we go. And run should be one more. Okay, so then it is list files in directory. We're gonna do ls. All right, so let's go ahead and see what happens, right? So we, again, GitHub folder, workflows is what it expects to find in your repository in order to say, right, I can do actions as long as you put the YAML files in here. Okay, get rid of that space, make it look neat, right? Again, get status, we will see we have a new folder, git add dot, we're in the root, so I can do that. Again, get status, you will see me do this a couple of times, and just commit. And we'll say build YAML. So this -m is the message for the current commit. So again, if I do git log, will you be? Yeah, here you can see the message. So build YAML in it. These are the messages for the commits, right? So yeah, let's go ahead and refresh the actions. Or rather, you're not going to see anything because we do get status. We can see your branch is ahead of origin master. Origin master is the stuff that's on GitHub, right? So if we do, again, git remote, that's the thing that's out there on GitHub. We are ahead, so we have one more commit than it's on GitHub, right? So we got to push our changes. So we push. Okay. And now if we refresh, hopefully go to the code, we got the GitHub, yep. Okay, so going back to actions, here is build my application, right? So that's the name of the script, right? Build my application, let's go on it. And here we can see a build. So this has spun up, it prepared a new virtual machine for us. And here if we go in it, so setup job, operating system, you can basically see what box you got. This is the version of Ubuntu. I think this is the same version as my terminal kind of thing. So never mind. What did our commands yield, right? Print current directory. All right. So we're in /home, runner, work, rock coding, tricking library. Okay, and rock coding, tricking library. So there's nested directories. What do we have in here? Nothing, right? So we have nothing in here, essentially empty directory, okay? And this is one thing, again, you are kind of like, why do I have nothing? You Google, how do I get source code in my virtual machine or my build agent? And then you find the answer, okay? So what you got to do is, let's go ahead and look for Github Actions again. And yeah, let's go in here and explore Github Actions. And this is where what you will find is you need an action called checkout, okay? This bad boy. And here, for each of these actions, they're going to tell you how to use them, etc. We don't need to do much. We just need the original command. And here you might want to pull a different repository. You want to do crazy stuff. So these are basically your parameters. This is your function, okay? This is the function. This is the program, essentially. But a program is kind of like a function, whatever. This is the function you execute. These are your parameters to the function, right? But again, this is a module someone built that basically plugs in to the whole GitHub CI/CD infrastructure, right? So we essentially grab this, and what we do, we put it before we print the current directory and list files, right? So this is where it's gonna check out. This is where it's gonna just go ahead and pull our repository. And here what you can see is, again, a name for this step, and this is something that we can just do. We'll say a name, and we'll say pull repo, or pull repository, or pull code, right? Repository is a little bit verbose, use code, a little bit easier to see. So one thing, make sure that these are aligned. Let's go ahead and actually move this down here so it's easier to check. But the primary thing that I want you to note is this is the same action, but this is just for something else. And with the parameters, right, this is kind of that. It was just meant to be like a hello world example with that, whatever that function does or action, doesn't matter, right? So that's what that was. It was just like something to compare to. It's just a different function that does something else, okay? And these functions live as code in GitHub repositories as well. So, never mind, and not to confuse too much, we're going to pull down the code, we're going to print the current directory, and then we're going to list. Okay, let's go ahead again. Get status, what's different? Add. I'm not gonna do get status because I already know what's in there, so pull code, right? Get status, we need to push. Okay, so here we are. Let's go ahead and go back to actions, and every time we push, remember that was the event that we set here. Right here. This is how it's going to be triggered automatically. And here it is. Here's our change for pull code, right? So let's go in there. Let's call build our app. And here we have first step is setup job. So you got to wait a little bit, right? It takes time to spin up your virtual machine and then execute the steps on it. So let's go ahead and see pull code. Here you can see the latest commit that's been pulled. And you can see the other things that it's doing. It's deleting the contents of this folder that we were originally in, right? So print current directory. Okay, we're still in the same directory. And now list files in directory. So here we have our tricking library .api and web client, okay? We don't have the .idea folder, etc. But the important thing is that we have our API library and we have our web client, all right? So the next thing to do, because this is gonna vary from CI/CD provider like Azure DevOps, Circle CI, Travis CI, whatever, TeamCity, any of these providers. This is gonna vary. So what we want to do is we want to basically just say, all right, check if we have, because what do we need to build a .NET Core application? We need .NET tools. What do we need to build npm and run npm code? npm, right? So check .NET CLI. So we're just gonna do .NET. and let's say check npm CLI, and we're just gonna do npm, and we can always verify. I will have to go to cmd.exe, and because my npm doesn't work, and I just want to check the output, right? So this is what the output's gonna look like. Let's go back here. So my Git actually works on both of them, right? I don't need to, but essentially, yeah. Let's add all. Let's commit with a message of CLI checks, and let's push. So that's done. Let's go ahead and check our pipeline. So we'll go to Actions, build my application. Here are the CLI checks. Open it up, go to build our app, wait for the workflow to start, right? So again, VM spins up, it's gonna check the YAML file, and then it's gonna, set your application up, and then we can do something, right? So here you can see that it fails on check.net CLI. Let's go open it up, and let's see what happens. So you can see that we have .NET CLI, but we just never executed anything. And check npm hasn't executed because this previous step failed. So this is what you will usually see. If your previous step breaks, the next step won't run, okay? So let's go ahead and fix this. So we have the tools, right? So in our case, we checked, do we have tools on the build agent? We do. If we don't, we go to .NET Core's documentation. We check the machine that we're on, Ubuntu latest. You can always go and see the operating system, Ubuntu, version, Google, how to install .NET Core on Ubuntu 18.04 LTS. And then you essentially, it's going to give you commands, which commands to do. And then you basically set it up and then proceed as you would on any other computer, right? So this is just the mind space that I want to get you in. It's just another computer. If you don't have a tool there, follow installation instructions on how to install a tool on this specific virtual machine. It's just like your computer or any other computer. Get the software on there, and then you can use that command line tool, okay? So let's go ahead and build. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab this, this command for listing, and we're going to list after we have built, okay? So again, one thing to note, if we go here and we do .NET Build from the solution, it builds fine, okay? So what we can do is we can do ls-r, and this is going to be a recursive, and that was a bad idea on there. So let's, big R, but let's do ls dot slash, or rather, let's just say tricking library API and .r, okay? So all we do is just say what is inside our tricking library folder, right? I don't want to see all the npm packages. I know those might be there, right? I just want to see the stuff that's inside our tricking. Has it actually been built? That sort of thing. So we can grab this command here. Let's go back here, and I didn't copy the. I forgot I removed the copy for the previous command. So hopefully I'm not boring you too much with this. For anybody who's like already know this stuff, spin up a different computer, build the application, check if we built it. All we're gonna do is check it in the console, right? So again, if I go to the previous one, maybe so we don't get an error, we can just print the version. So npm-v. Let's go ahead and try that. Okay. So going back here, git status, all, git commit, build app and log. Oh, remove them, but okay. Git status, git push. All right. So again, scrolling up, going back to the actions, and one thing, the best way to learn is really just step by step. So first list the directory, amend the thing, recommit, push, and check the commands every time. Write them down if you have to, put them in a notepad somewhere, but never just copy paste. Otherwise, you're gonna learn how to copy paste the commands from one location to another. You're not gonna learn the words of what your copy pasting consists of, right? Actually, type out the commands. Might seem slow at first, but then you're gonna get better and better. Okay, so here it's finished. Let's go ahead and check out our .NET CLI build. Looks like all the stuff has built successfully. List directories. Here, if we take a look, we can see the stuff in the bin folder. We have a debug folder. Here we have .NET Core App 3.1, and then we have properties and the tracking library.api and deps.json. So it looks like the stuff that's been built is there. As we can see, the bin and obj folders have been created here. So yeah, scrolling down, whoa, all the DLLs, everything, yeah, everything's been created. So looks like the npm step is finished as well. So if we go to check npm, run npm-v, we get the version as well. Okay, so when you spin up this box, what you can expect, or another term for the VM is box, virtual machine, VM, box, okay, or build agent. These are all get used in the industry essentially. So when you spin up a box, VM, or build agent, you can expect to have the .NET tools on there and the npm tools on there. All right. So lucky you on the GitHub Actions, maybe this is something that the build agent or GitHub recognizes. Oh, he has JavaScript and .NET code in his repository and spins it up. I don't know if that's how it works. It's pretty cool if that's what actually happens, but nevertheless, simple CI/CD pipeline. Just to kind of summarize, you have a computer on a server rack. Essentially, you have almost like a computer, but it's a virtual machine. It's a computer that doesn't sit on hardware; it sits on software. Okay, and you're just executing commands like you would on a normal computer. If you're missing some commands, install the software that provides you those commands. Okay, and you have to follow the instructions for the appropriate computer. So that's pretty much the gist of it. Let's just quickly, before, I know this is already a long video, but let's just quickly go over some tools that, for example, like GitKraken or your IDE can provide you with. So one thing that I really like about Writer is, for example, if I go to the web client, pages, and index page, if you remember, we've been editing the index page God knows how long, and if I try to go from the async data to created, but that happened a couple of days ago. I haven't put that in my commit, right? So what I can do is I can say right click, well, not show in Explorer, that was the wrong. We can go to show local history, right? So Writer keeps track of the state of the file for you, and you can see all the things that you've added, missed out, right? So you can see this was before I've actually added the message. You can see it pretty much works like a version control, but for your local changes. So just know that this sort of technology exists, right? It's 2020. If your IDE doesn't provide you with that, or if your text editor doesn't provide you with that, maybe it's time to switch. I don't know. If you already enjoy your IDE and you're comfortable, why switch? There's also the kind of version control visualization that you can get. Again, because we don't have too much here, this is not very impressive, but you can see at what points what files have been updated, what changes have took place, what we have we changed, etc. Right? So this is built into Writer. I think Visual Studio has something similar. Usually you'd use a third-party program like GitKraken or something. Again, I'm referring to because I use it at work. I don't get to use Writer at work. Could I would? But yeah, again, Git visualization tools, your IDE support. This is something that exists. If you would like to have it, look, Google, see if your text editor or IDE actually provides you with this. But yeah, again, a super simple example, just trying to create a repository so I can share your codes. The code will be available in the description now. A simple example of GitHub Actions. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like, subscribe. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments section. If you would like me to go a little bit more in depth on Git, if you don't understand, I don't think there's much more to it than other just committing. I don't think I'm gonna go in depth on it, but nevertheless, don't forget to join the Discord server. I stream on Sundays and Wednesdays, 6 o'clock London time, so tune in if you're into that sort of thing, and hopefully I'll see you in my other episodes.